Sure. The initial point, I was spent most of my life as a young Earth creationist as well. I know that a lot of Christians these days have a lot of different beliefs when it comes to origins, and that's all good and fine. But I was a young Earth creationist, and so the initial thing was I started to delving into some of the science around dinosaurs and evolution. Even though I didn't believe it, I actually just wanted to know some of the things that I thought the secular people believed, the crazy things they believed, and I started to become convinced that a lot of those things held some merit. And so I pursued material from Answers in Genesis in particular to try and restore my faith back to where it was on young Earth. And it just couldn't. Ken Ham couldn't bring me back or convince me the young Earth position was tenable anymore. At that point, I accepted evolution, but of course, millions of Christians around the world accept evolution. That's not a problem for their faith. But that really sent me on, well, I always thought that was true based on authority. What else am I accepting is true on authority? And I started looking at the construction of scripture, who wrote the books, how do we know that they're true, how do we know that anything, can we confirm anything in the Bible? And so once it started affirming for me, for example, that Jesus seems to affirm a historical Adam and a historical Moses and that kind of thing, but a lot of the evidence doesn't support historical Adam and historical Moses. There's so it creates a lot of tension, and eventually, so those kind of things became a domino to where I couldn't even hold on to theistic evolution or anything like that. It just seemed to me that the whole Bible is really a human book, much like every other book is human book. Does that? I don't want to take up too much of the time in case there's other questions, but no, that's a really good point. So it actually, I should have shared that it took me one step further. So I actually, even after I accepted that, I came to a conclusion for myself that the Bible was purely just man-made, written sort of thing. I still had a lot of experiences in my life that I would attributed to closeness with God, and what I felt at the time was a very real relationship with Jesus. So, so young Earth fell away, the Bible fell away, but I was still holding on to, what I felt was the relationship, and so that took the last 3 or 4 months was me just daily crying out in prayer kind of stuff and just waiting for answers back, waiting for affirmation, asking for all those things until eventually, as a youth pastor and some of those kind of things, I started to look at some of the ways that I personally, we would deal with youth. We would take them away from their parents. We would put them on retreats. We would, we'd go to another city and we'd stay up late and give them sugar and, have music that would stir specific emotions and give general altar calls that we knew, a lot of teens were dealing with issue X or issue Y. And if you kind of call that out, it's going to resonate with a lot of them. I was just looking at my own self as a worship leader and a youth leader, and it's like, no, I think a lot of that, even the emotional stuff, even what I felt during my baptism, I was attributing falsely to what I thought was God, but was really emotions that could be just as easily attributed to kind of reproducible inputs that create the same kind of emotional stirrings in people. So my last day as a Christian was running on a treadmill, basically crying out to God, listening to worship music one last time, as a believer, waiting for that last domino to fall. So the intellectual, I held on to it emotionally longer than I held on to it intellectually. Sure, absolutely. So of course, it was very scary for me because as I mentioned, all my friends, all my business partners, almost everyone in my life who was important to me was a Christian. I knew virtually no other people outside the Christian community. So it was very scary. And I shared with one important person in my life some of the struggles I was having. And that person ended up using it against me and started telling all my other key friends and key family before I was ready to kind of come out. And that became a cascade of me being basically everyone cutting themselves off from me. There was very much an environment of, if you are not a Christian with me anymore, you are not my friend, you are not my family anymore. And fortunately, my children didn't cut me off that much, but there was definitely a distance, and we have great relationships now. We've restored those back. But at the time, even that was shaky that I would still be able to have relationships with my children. And then very shortly after that, I was diagnosed with cancer about a couple months after that. And then people started coming back into my life to tell me that the cancer that I had, the life threat that I was currently facing, was God's judgment upon me, and that all I would need to do is come back, and that would be fine. But, until no one was willing to talk me through it, they were just basically wanting to cut me off. If I was to give advice to not only my old self, but my old friends, if they had wanted to help me better, it would be that doubt doubt shouldn't be shunned. I mean, if I was doing things that I think there are appropriate times for you to cut people out of your life if they're being poisonous and harmful. Like if someone becomes a non-believer and they start doing things that are detrimental to you, that's your choice to cut them off. But doubt, in and of itself, should be welcomed. Whoever has the truth should welcome doubt, right? And so, if you create a space where doubt is shunned, then you're going to create a lot more people like me who just have to go and figure those answers out all on my own without any help from anyone else. So, and really, I think the key message of the gospel, if you take the salvation part out, the secondary part is to love your neighbor, right? Loving your neighbor is the unconditional part. Jesus didn't say, love your neighbor if they believe what you believe, right? It's like, love your enemy, pray for those who persecute you. Essentially, the most important thing that you need to that I would recommend if you have someone in your life who's going through times of struggle like I did with the truth of it, make sure that first that they know that you love them. Because if they don't know that, then you have no chance with them winning them back. So that's actually a relatively new message I've been trying to give to my Christian viewers, is that creating the situation that I got put into definitely put me into a few years of isolation where all I had was atheists reaching out to me and atheists who were giving me love at that point. And of course, you know that you're going to go where the community is too. So that's, if you leave someone no choice but to go to the atheists, then that's where they're going to land. Anyway, that's a weird rant from someone like me, but sorry. Yes, I would say that I'm in the most intellectually honest place to be. I know Frank Turek, who I recently spoke with, as I mentioned, he likes to open his conversations with non-believers. Like, if you're convinced Christianity is true, would you become a Christian? And my answer is yes. I know a lot of secular people, their answer is no. But for me, it would be. My life would be better. I'd have a lot of relationships restored. The idea of heaven's kind of cool sometimes, depending on how it manifests. So emotionally, I wouldn't mind coming back to Christianity, but for me, the price of the intellectual honesty is too high for me to jump there. So yeah, I think I'm convinced that with the evidence I have right now, and I'm open to new evidence, that my position is correct and that Christianity is false.